welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in today, the Friday edition of Let's Talk Nutrition. Glad to be with you. So, who's on the menu today? You need a mic.
Jim Lavelle from Kyolic.
James. Well, there's a new twist on the obesity epidemic. Gary, let me see. Do you have, if I send you the link to New York Times, do you have access to it?
No, I burnt mine out.
You don't? They won't let you on. Sure?
Yeah.
That's a shame. Because there's some images. Do you remember when the cigarette company, remember the ads? What was that? Was it Joe Camel? Was that the figure's name?
For Camel cigarettes, and then they were really big into motorcycle racing.
Okay. Well, there was more going on there than we know. Then you had the image, if you all remember, with Kool-Aid. Remember with the
Kool-Aid Man? Oh yeah.
Well, there was Hawaiian Punch,
Punchy.
Then there were Kool-Aid bursts. All those different images that they created. I don't know if you know this or not, but at some point in time, the cigarette companies bought these beverage and food companies. The tobacco companies once sold sugar-sweetened drinks such as Tang, Capri Sun, Kool-Aid. I mean, a lot of people know that. So researchers got their hands on an archive of cigarette company documents at the University of California in San Francisco. And researchers doing what they do. And they found internal correspondence that showed tobacco, and this is a story in the New York Times giving them attribution, that tobacco executives barred from targeting children for cigarette sales, obviously, then turned their marketing expertise and prowess on young people to sell sugary beverages, the likes of which had never been done before in the way they did it. The archive of documents is known as the Truth Tobacco Industry Documents. Those documents were provided and became public as part of a settlement between the major cigarette companies and various states that were seeking to recoup smoke-related health costs. They sued them. And the researchers published their findings yesterday in the medical publication British Medical Journal, BMJ. Now, we're in the grips of an obesity epidemic. Children are at grave risk. I'm using my language carefully and not hyperbolically. You have better than 25% of children and adolescents who are overweight or obese, and about 17% or more that are obese out of that 25. You got type 2 diabetes that is now on a linear upswing in adolescence, like the likes of which we have not seen before. And so these cigarette companies got into the business of creating and marketing junk food and sugary drinks to kids. I'm not making this up. Please understand that within 3 decades, we have found ourselves in the grips of this obesity epidemic. And it is having devastating consequences on the health of the nation. And there's not enough outrage to be blunt. A Laura Schmidt, she's author of the study. Dr. Schmidt said this: we have a chronic disease epidemic. Thank you very much, Dr. Schmidt. That's right. We have a chronic disease epidemic, but we don't understand the vectors very well. These documents help us understand how food and beverage companies, using strategic, crafty tactics, got us hooked on unhealthy products, close quote. Now, I come on air and I say these things. And I guess some people must think I should just sort of pull that out of the air and to be, dramatic or whatever. No, I'm not. I'm just reporting. R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris no longer own drink brands. They didn't want to comment. I guess they were approached, as did the companies that later acquired the brands. Experts said that, and this is the New York Times talking, experts said tobacco executives had a keen appreciation for the importance of earning customer loyalty at an early age. I mean, this is unconscionable. It's unconscionable. To make money, I wonder if they understand. Maybe these executives looked at the world in the abstract and said, we're gonna buy these junk food companies, we're gonna buy these beverage companies, and we're gonna use everything we learned in cigarette sales marketing, and we're gonna use all those techniques, and we're going to target these kids. I mean, how do you do that? And then you go home and you have kids sitting there, and and you're not going to ever persuade me that they didn't understand that this was not a good idea, that this was going to have significant health consequences on these kids. Quote, if a kid gets used to drinking Kool-Aid instead of water, they are always going to prefer a sugary beverage, close quote, said Ms. Harris, who was not involved in a study. And she went on to say, and the advertising creates positive associations between these products in the minds of the children, close quote. I remember the Hawaiian Punch commercials. I remember the Kool-Aid commercials. I remember all of those beverage, and I'm sure you do too. And they were clever. They were crafty. They were catchy. Hawaiian Punch was sold as a cocktail mixer before it became a beverage drink. Did you know that? They used Hawaiian Punch as a cocktail mixer for adults. After purchasing the brand, the New York Times said, in 1963 for Pacific Hawaiian products, R.J. Reynolds rebranded the beverage for children and not for cocktail mix. Executives expanded the repertoire, the New York Times says, of flavors to 16 instead of that, remember that Atomic Red? And discontinued Amber Apple, a product favored by mothers after taste tests with children found that they preferred red apple. You can't make this up. I don't know how those guys sleep at night. story in the New York Times is revelatory. Sometimes it makes me speechless, because where we are now with this obesity crisis is that we're having children growing up in a state of high state of illness. We have never, ever in the history of this country, ever, this is unprecedented, had such a situation. Why should a 10-year-old be on high blood pressure medication? Taking cholesterol medications, suffering from type 2 diabetes, being obese, growing into adulthood in a state of illness with adult diseases that happen at midlife in the past for adults, with adults. This obesity crisis didn't drop out of the ether and just was present. What happened? What happened was the food culture changed, bit by bit, component by component. And this part of the story where the tobacco companies, knowing that they couldn't target children, began targeting children. They bought junk food companies and soft drink companies and began targeting children with these sugary drinks and junk food. This story in the New York Times is just stunning. What the documents reveal. R.J. Reynolds rebranded Hawaiian Punch. Know this. Hawaiian Punch was sold as a cocktail mixer. It was a cocktail mixer. And they rebranded it. And this was about 1963 is when they bought Pacific Hawaiian Products Company. And they took all of their expertise that they had learned in marketing cigarettes, selling and marketing cigarettes, and they applied it to these beverages. And then they took Hawaiian Punch and they created a little image called Punchy. It was this. The New York Times described it as a cheeky pugilist. I don't know if you remember Punchy. Gary can find an image. There he is. And they put that image. You found it on school book covers. It was in the Sunday newspaper comics. It was on drinking cups. They had branded wristwatches. The kids were lured in with these images. And then they took, I don't know if you remember, that giant can, and then they made the smaller cans so the kids could carry them around. Hawaiian Punch contains, back then and even today, contains 5% fruit juice and 14 grams of sugar in one serving. That's more than the half the recommended daily limit for kids. And their argument, these companies, their argument is, these are just beverages. You can't blame the obesity epidemic on us. Well, nobody takes responsibility. We just sell beverages. Well, okay. And then you go to the food companies. What about, all the junk foods? I could spend the next 2 hours going down the list, and they're going to say, it's just a cookie. It's just a Twinkie. It's just, how can you blame it on us? In 1973, the New York Times reports that R.J. World the company's in-house publication, extolled Punchy's instant eye appeal, as they described it, and described him as the best salesman the beverage has ever had, close quote. They got this out of documents in a lawsuit, from a lawsuit. That same year, R.J. Reynolds, this was 1973, they introduced the Pop Top 8-ounce cans that they described as, quote, perfect for children, close quote. That comes out of company documents. And that was the alternative to that. I don't know if you remember. I remember going to the store and having tried to pick up that 46-ounce metal canister. And you had to puncture it. You had to have a can opener that, you know, with the, like a triangle at the end. By the 1980s, the brand was pulling in, are you ready? $200 million annually with child-friendly juice boxes. And those kids were taking that stuff to school. This was, you took a bunch of brilliant marketing people and you cut them loose on these kids, unsuspecting. They're victims, man. And they're going to say, we have nothing to do with this obesity. You have everything to do with this obesity epidemic. You and every other junk food company and beverage company that targets kids and gets them to be in an obese state. Shame on you. Welcome back. Welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition. I'm reporting on this new study published in the British Medical Journal about how the cigarette companies, knowing that they were not permitted to target children with their cigarette products, figured out that they needed to continue to make money, and so they decided to buy junk food and beverage companies and target children. Andrew Jacobs wrote the article in the New York Times, and the study is based upon documents that the researchers were able to get their hands on because of a lawsuit. And Dr. Schmidt is one of the study's authors. I have to read to you from the New York Times because I won't do it justice as to how Mr. Jacobs unfolds this narrative. And he says, Dr. Schmidt, one of the study's authors, said the marriage of tobacco companies and sweetened beverage brands was about more than marketing. Cigarette companies were frequently introducing new flavored products, and many of the chemicals that went into cherry-scented chewing tobacco and apple-flavored cigarettes found their way into children's drinks. A 1985 company report attributed the success of Hawaiian Punch to R.J. Reynolds scientists who had created, quote, a beverage formula starting from our knowledge of flavors we already produce or have in our flavor library, close quote. The goal, the report said, quote, is to leave people wanting more, close quote, meaning the kids. Flush with cash and with the prospect of government regulation mounting, cigarette companies accelerated their purchase of food and beverage companies. In 1985, Philip Morris, not to be done by R.J. Reynolds, impressed by R.J. Reynolds' success with Hawaiian Punch, applied the same marketing techniques to Kool-Aid, which it acquired when it bought General Foods, according to these company documents that were acquired from the lawsuit. For decades, Kool-Aid had been sold in powder form as a cheaper alternative to soda. I remember that clearly, with ads aimed squarely at penny-pinching housewives. I remember those packets in the house, man. Philip Morris quickly shifted gears by having H-A-L-V-I-G, its advertising budget for mothers to $10.7 million and more than doubling the amount spent on children's marketing to $6 million, according to company figures. Quote, we've decided, this is the company's now, Philip Morris talking, quote, we've decided to focus our marketing on kids, where we know our strength is the greatest, close quote, a company executive boasted at an industry conference in 1987. Quote, this year, Kool-Aid will be the most heavily promoted kids trademark in America, close quote. The mascot, which I remember well, was the Kool-Aid Man, was an anthropomorphized glass pitcher, remember with the smiley face on it, who was fond of crashing through walls and fences, sending terrified adults into goofy pratfalls. The following year, Philip Morris introduced a loyalty swag program, Wacky Wild Prize Warehouse, modeled on the Marlboro Country Store, which rewarded frequent smokers with branded camping gear, clothing, and poker sets. In 1992, a Philip Morris marketing analysis described Wacky Warehouse, a collaboration with toy makers like Nintendo and Mattel, as, quote, the most effective kids marketing vehicle known, close quote. Understand, by design and with forethought of purpose, they sat in these boardrooms planning and scheming how to target kids to sell these products, knowing damn well that these products were jacked with sugar, that They were not what they purported to be. They were not a juice. They had a small amount of juice. The rest was just junk. 14 or more grams per serving. And by design, they set about to target innocent. The moms didn't know any better. They thought it was just a beverage, man. And they introduced that into the food culture, and it's here to stay. By then, Kool-Aid had expanded into a dizzying constellation of frozen pops, bursts, jammers, and shots that came in dozens of flavors like Great Bludini, Purple SARS Rex, and colors that changed when mixed with water. The success with Kool-Aid persuaded Philip Morris it could apply the same marketing magic to guess what? Tang, the 1950s era power drink that people of a certain age will recall as the beverage supposedly favored by astronauts. You remember that? I remember it. In 1996, Philip Morris, which inherited Tang from General Foods, declared the brand, quote, as dead as the space program, close quote. The solution? Rebrand Tang for young adolescents. These people were about making money. Plain and simple. That's it. These weren't healthy drinks. This was junk at its most ultimate form. And lethal because it was liquid. And these kids would guzzle it down like nobody's business. I remember doing it myself. The company unleashed a wave of television ads that positioned Tang as an extreme orange breakfast drink for today's extreme tweens. That's a quote. A breakfast drink, my foot. The ads featured orangutans on motorcycles and sleepy teens zapped awake by a glass of sugary Tang. The company forged marketing arrangements with Sports Illustrated and Schwinn Bicycles and created a loyalty program to rival that wacky warehouse program that they had where they would give you, they would reward you with gifts, all kinds of paraphernalia. Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds no longer own drink brands, having sold them or spun them off over the past 2 decades. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That human beings, adults, could target children like that and just the consequences of what they did are here today, and we're paying for it.
Feel
Talking about this new study in the British Medical Journal where the researchers got their hands on documents that were part of a lawsuit where states were seeking to recoup the costs associated with people smoking and the cigarette companies, contributing to that and all the illness and the cancer. And states sued these companies and they wanted them to compensate the states for what the cigarette companies did. And so these documents were quite revelatory. And what they reveal is that Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds, for example, bought these beverage companies and junk food companies, the beverage companies in particular, Hawaiian Punch, Tang, Kool-Aid, all those kind of beverages, and then set about to target children and adolescents and get them hooked on the products. That was back in the 60s and then made its way into the 70s. And that was, I know that was in the other century, but what it did is it altered the food culture in our country. And it altered the health of the children and literally the nation, because these children grew up to be adults. And even to this day, those beverages and foods are integrated, synthesized, tightly woven, however I want to say it, into the food culture. They're not going to go away. And by design and with great purpose, these companies, these tobacco companies, used all of their chemistry knowledge, all of their marketing skills to create products that children, like the company said, we want them to keep coming back for more. And I've said this on the air many times, that they have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of PhDs and XYZs of one sort or another working for them in these food labs, making these foods addictive. And people think, well, he's just off the reservation altogether. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And to this, right now as I speak to you, there are kids whose lives will be shortened by an appreciable amount because of these kinds of things that happened decades ago. And you just can't make it up. It is unconscionable to me that there's no penalty. It's not a criminal offense. They're just going to say, we're just engaging in marketing. We're just selling products. Just like they said with cigarettes. These are benign, no problem. Really? Yeah, well. And I was talking with Stephen off air, and he made an interesting point. He was saying that getting these kids conditioned to these particular products then conditioned them to become candidates to buy cigarettes. And then as I thought about it, I said, well, there's conditioning going on another level here too. The children became conditioned to the conditioning, the type of conditioning. In other words, it wasn't just necessarily the products that they were getting conditioned, learning to adopt, but the technique itself. And they became conditioned to respond to conditioning, if you follow me. So you have learning, in psychology, it's called learning theory. So you have learning going on different levels here. So they're conditioned to consume the product, but they're also conditioned to respond to the technique of the conditioning itself, which I had not thought about until Stephen got me thinking, which is an intriguing idea. And I think it has merit. So you're conditioned not only to the product, but to the technique itself to sell the product to the kid.
Pavlov's dog.
Yeah, Pavlov's dog. I mean, that's classical conditioning. Then there's operant conditioning, different forms of learning. At the end of the day, you know, yes, we're supposed to have free will, and yes, you know, B.F. Skinner wasn't all wrong. I know he gets heavily criticized, but we get habitual. I use the word habituated on air because, you know, if I start using the language of conditioning, I'm going to numb people to sleep. But we get habituated. We get conditioned to consume these foods. That's why people have such a difficult time changing their diet. Be mindful that these behaviors became conditioned at an early age. This is so imprinted on their brain. They're so behaviorally locked in. It's hard to change those behaviors. It's remarkable. It is I mean, this story, the narrative, the future will not be kind. Historians will not be kind to these companies. They're already not kind. I'm not. I think what they have done is insidious. People say, well, they have the right to sell the product. Well, that's true, but you don't have the right to put people's health at risk with the product. They say, well, it's not at risk. Really? You put 14 grams of sugar in one serving to these kids in some of those products, and it's more than that? They say, well, it's just sugar. Really? It's just food. Food has consequences. That article's in the New York Times by Andrew Jacobs. He wrote that article's terrific. He's a good investigative reporter. Man, oh man. Just remember, the obesity epidemic is here for different reasons. And this is one of the primary reasons. The introduction of junk foods and sugary drinks into the food culture. And all the fast food chains, thousands of them, all over the country, they're not going away. None of that is going away. None of it. So we have to figure out, how do you raise children so that they can remain healthy and not become diseased, literally diseased by these foods.
Michael in Pennsylvania writes, it's almost brainwashing.
Of a sort. I'll be back. to the show. Great to be with you. Thanks for stopping by today. I spent the first hour reporting on a study in British Medical Journal. It was published yesterday. And then there's a New York Times article. Aaron Jacobs reported on it. And it really, when you get into it, you realize how, you hear me talk about the obesity epidemic a lot on the show, and for good reason. I started this, more than 5 years ago, where I really started to educate myself and become as informed as I could about this epidemic. And it's not just about people, and forgive the language, being fat, which I hate that kind of talk, but that's how it gets talked about. It's much more than that. The health of children and adolescents and adults has been put at grave risk due to this epidemic. And lives will be shaved off of these kids. Many of these kids are growing up with these adult diseases due to the obesity. And one of the contributors, and I don't care what they say, they can swear under oath in front of a congressional committee, just like the tobacco executives did, and deny that these products that they targeted back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s at kids, Tang, Kool-Aid, Hawaiian Punch, and other products. These were cigarette companies. R.J. Reynolds, Philip Morris. The documents that these researchers were able to get their hands on because of the lawsuit brought against these companies by states for all the illness that the cigarette smoking caused. The states wanted to be compensated for the health costs, I presume. And so these documents, and they came upon a gold mine of information and insight into what was being said in board meetings, marketing meetings, whatever, strategy meetings to target kids. They got up with purpose of mind every morning, went to work and said, how can we get these kids hooked on these products? And innocent moms went, and I remember these products in the house myself, and all the commercials. And not only were we conditioned to consume the products, we became conditioned to the type of conditioning and responsive to that form of influence. So you have conditioning happening, learning happening on different levels. And to this very day, as I sit here and speak to you now, as you listen or watch this show, the consequences of what went on back decades ago in that other century have contributed and brought us to this point right now where we have most 70% of the population overweight or obese. The projections for 2050 are off the chain. And I don't see it abating at all. It may happen. They're saying 80%. Forecasting models, 80% of the population overweight or obese, with maybe as much as 42% of the population being obese. Do you realize how ill the nation is and will be? I'm just saying, I'll be long gone, but you mark my words. I said it 100 times. I'll say it 100 more. There will be a president that will go on national TV someday and say, we have a crisis. And I don't know what they're waiting for, but somebody needs to do that now. Jim Lavelle is my guest, and he's with Wakunaga of America. I know he didn't come here to talk about that, but I'm going to bring him on. And then we have a caller from Tampa, too. Bill, welcome. Jim, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
You can call me Bill. or you can call me Bob. But don't you call me Johnson, okay?
Okay. I won't. I won't call you Johnson.
You just came up. I mean, I know. I mean, look, that is the epidemic, man. There isn't even another epidemic. It's the problem, and the problem with all of it is there are so many things now that really point at the problem of metabolic management of obesity, right? I mean, it's more than just people are eating too much. There's a lot of issues around it, and it's 78% of the U.S. population right now is the current number that's either overweight or obese.
Okay,
38% obese.
Yeah, 38. Okay, so the number, it's off the chain totally. Those I was looking at CDC numbers; they don't have it quite that high, but depends on who you're looking at or reading. But it is just remarkable where we are. You certainly must see this in your practice, James.
Well, I mean, it's funny, when I moved to California from Ohio, I thought I was going to see a lot healthier population, where I think there is, a little bit healthier trend. People that are overweight are everywhere. I just came back from a cruise. I mean, my family took a cruise from Long Beach, California to Mexico. 8 out of 10 people overweight.
Absolutely. And on that cruise, they weren't practicing Buddhist monastery eating practices. I can tell you that right now.
What do you mean, man? They were juicing greens. Everybody was getting chia seed crackers. There was. What are you talking about?
You're a liar. Let's go to Tampa, Florida. Bill, welcome to the show.
Before I get to my comment, I had spoke to you before and mentioned a friend of mine that was working on a cruise ship. He was an EMT. He said he would watch the people come on the cruise ship, and he would just get panic attacks because every other person, as he's saying, is so out of shape and overweight. He was scared to death that
Yep.
These people are going to have heart attacks and this and that, and those are the people that go on cruises. But back to your Hawaiian Punch and stuff, it's a shame that it just conjures up the best of times in my head. And you know me, I'm seriously into this health thing, but today, doctor, because of you, I'm going to buy some Hawaiian Punch and pour it over ice.
Bill, it was a cocktail mixer. Before the cigarette companies got a hold of it, that one cigarette company, I don't know if it was Philip, I think it was R.J. Reynolds, got a hold of it and said, we can rebrand this. It's not just a cocktail mixture. We're going to sell it as juice. And that's what they did, Bill.
Those cans, I can see my mom popping those cans open.
Yes.
Four kids sitting around as she punched those cans and poured it into the glasses.
Yes.
And we suckled it more than mother's milk. I mean, we had to have it. It was a treat.
Absolutely, man. Over ice? Are you kidding me? Over ice?
Those were the best of times, Doc, and thanks for bringing it up because Tang and Kool-Aid, and you know my mom's gone. I called you last week, but last year, but all those things, the peanut butter sandwiches with the Hawaiian Punch and the Tang and the Kool-Aid, those were great times. It's just a shame that those drinks, those companies just don't give a damn about anybody's health and had made those drinks healthy because they could have easily done it.
They could have. But profit is what it is. Making money. James, it's not about the money, but it's always about the money.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah. The metabolic derangement that exists in this, and that you work at this every day. This is what you do for a living.
That's exactly right.
The metabolic derangement it's indescribable. And it's not just about being overweight. It's about being undernourished and in a state of chronic ill health. I'm not talking about elderly people. I'm talking about children. You're listening to Let's Talk Nutrition. James Lavelle, Jim Lavelle, Jimmy Lavelle, Johnson Lavelle, whatever you want to call him, is on the show today. I'll get him to tell you what he does for a living, and he sees this all the time. And he has ideas, and he always has something on his mind to share. He's a good guest. We'll be right back. my guest today, educator for Wampanoag of America. Wampanoag of America is the company that's responsible for the manufacture, marketing, distribution, and contribution of Kyolic Aged Garlic Extract, among other products. James, welcome back to the show. The audience is always changing and growing in size. A lot of people that are still here that when the last time you're on, but there are new members. In a thumbnail sketch, tell people what you do for a living. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I think I wear a couple hats. I mean, first, I'm a co-chair for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, so I teach literally, thousands of doctors and healthcare providers a year, how to tear people's chemistries apart and really try to repair them. And then I have a clinical practice and have for the last almost 40 years now, where, I work on everything from, professional athletes to people that are really struggling with their chronic health issues. And it's the same concept. It's how do I maximize or optimize your chemistry, your metabolism, so that you can be the best you can be for where you're at. And then in addition to that, I've written 20 books, and I've got 2 books coming out in the next year and a half that I've been working on. So I stay a little bit busy.
Do you ever get to see your wife?
I was on the cruise with her, man. What are you talking about?
You weren't at Expo West then?
I was not. I was teaching. I had to actually teach. I didn't have to, but I was teaching physicians peptide therapy. So there's kind of a new category out there. You see a lot of the stuff online of peptides that are
peptide therapy,
not for human use, but these are it's how to use them with FDA monographed for human use.
Peptides. You're talking about the linking of amino acids?
Yeah, there's different peptides that your body makes, and of course, I mean the problem is it's a little bit on the controversial side, but God, the results.
What's it used for, James?
It's everything from gut repair to improving neurologic function to improving your body's own growth hormone release instead of giving growth hormone.
Well, what amino acids?
Therapies are pretty interesting.
What amino acids are you using here?
Well, peptides are the ones that peptides are made by your body, so we all have the same amino acids, right?
Yeah.
How they're sequenced, and so growth hormone, releasing hormone, body protection compound, right? These are compounds that your body makes in order to regulate how you age. And when you get sick or you're aging, you don't make them as much. And there's, literally, and that's really kind of where the future of the pharmaceutical industry is going, is looking at peptides or using signals that your body recognizes because you make these compounds to turn things back on and off that should have occurred, and not just suppress it or stimulate it by a straight drug. So it's a pretty interesting area. It's certainly on it's on the cutting edge, and it's my next area of interest.
Yeah, I'm here at the A4M website, and they talk about peptides are the newly emerging science of cell signaling amino acid sequences with far-reaching regulatory and rejuvenation actions on neuroendocrine immune functionality. The specifically targeted use of peptides in the environment has the potential to rewrite bodily chemistry relationships and ultimately generate a restorative trend towards anabolism and homeostasis.
There you go.
And then the next line is, and peptide, and you'll be able to walk on water and open the heavens and the earth. No, it doesn't say that.
In the end, everybody is looking for some kind of magic. And the reality is the magic is people need to take care of themselves. They need to make more responsible decisions. And then whether you take a natural product or you take a drug or you take a peptide or you exercise or you meditate, guess what? Things start to work better because you're being more responsible about your health. And I think it's the hardest thing to get people, being in practice as long as I had, It's one of the hardest things to do until people, a lot of times, are really deathly ill.
Mm-hmm.
Get them to become responsible about the decisions they make about their health.
Yeah, I see your image here. You and Dr. Dr. William Seeds.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's a nice photo of you.
Oh, well, that's good. I don't even know what it looks like. So thank you.
Well, if you turn on your computer and go to letstalknutrition.com, I have the image right there. I'm showing my computer image of you on the screen. Yeah. So anyway, at the show, one of the things that I noticed at Expo West, everything's plant-based, James. Plant-based this, plant-based that. Everything's plant-based, plant-based, plant-based. That's the trend. I mean, I joked with one of my producers. I said, I'm looking for plant-based shoes. You have any? You know, those would be shoes made out of hemp, by the way, right?
I mean, you gotta love marketing, right? I mean, people catch on to a trend, and then it just gets exploited to the point where, okay, we've worn that one out. What are we going to go to next? The next trend's going to be insect-based. Do you have any insect-based nutrition, right? I mean, it's already kind of there with the cricket protein.
Well,
it hasn't got to its zenith yet, right?
Well, once we exhaust the food supply, we'll be eating the crickets. You're listening to Jim LaBelle, educated for Wampanoag of America. Kyolic Age Garlic Extract. In my opinion, he's all into aging. I think one of the greatest threats to successful aging is obesity. Hands down. It's got to be at the top of the list, at least it is for me. And cardiovascular disease. Oh, my goodness. This is where Kyolic comes in.
Don't be stressed out or anxious. Take Hempanol, the only raw CO2 hemp extract available.
What's on the top of your mind today?
Well, you kind of talked about the whole obesity epidemic and really what's going on. I mean, the problem with obesity is what comes with it is a whole bag of metabolic problems like chronic inflammation. People that are overweight have the equivalent of a low-grade infection in their body 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And so that's a major issue. So, why I like aged garlic is, of course, it in studies where they had people that were obese take it, they actually saw their inflammatory markers go down significantly. And when you start to couple that with a lot of other recent studies on aged garlic, like the gingivitis study, where they showed a significant reduction in gingivitis, and why that's important is gingivitis is linked to heart disease. I think aged garlic extracts, it's one of the most important compounds for people. If they're going to take something that's a natural compound, this is an amazing compound because over 800 articles and publications are on it. You have a lot of human clinical trials, which not a lot of companies do that. So from my perspective, what I'm always looking at is what dampens the pro-inflammatory stance of your body, that as you start to be stressed out and get exposed to environmental burden and drink Hawaiian Punch and don't sleep enough and don't get the exercise you need and make the wrong choices with your food, as you're trying to rechange all that processing that's going on in your body, what are some just fantastic compounds that you can take? And for me, aged garlic's right at the top, just like replenishing people's magnesium pools and their iron stores and other essential nutrients they need. I really think that aged garlic extract is one of the most essential nutrients that somebody can take.
877-897-8255. Jim Lavelle is our guest today. It certainly has made a contribution to helping people with cardiovascular health, in particular coronary heart disease. I mean, it really does do the arteries a lot of good, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the studies, and I mean, these are just becoming a stacked pile of studies related to blood pressure improvement, and that what that means is that the blood vessels are becoming more pliable and flexible. The inner lining of the artery, the endothelium, becomes healthier and more normalized. Oxidized LDL or bad cholesterol that rusts is kind of why we plaque to begin with, and it dramatically reduces the amount of oxidation that goes on LDL cholesterol. It blocks bone mineral density loss, and that's important because as your bones leach calcium out, it gets deposited in your arteries. Now, there's other areas where I think it's important. Like they found out that when they gave aged garlic extract to people and it lowered their blood pressure, they started looking at what happens to the immune system, and a couple things happen. One is that there's better diversity. So they just found out that aged garlic actually acts as a prebiotic, which I think is pretty fascinating.
In other words, it serves as food for the healthy bacteria in the gut?
That's exactly right. and the other piece that's interesting is that in terms of cold and flu, it helps to modulate the immune system and get your immune system ready to fight cold and flu bugs off. So when you start to think of an agent that kind of has what's called, what I use the term pleiotropic, which is basically multiple effects on your body. It's interesting because it has effects on a compound called adiponectin, which helps blood sugar regulation. Mm-hmm. It has effects on all the parameters of lipids, so, oxidized LDL, blood vessel health, pliability of blood vessels, regressing vulnerable plaque, has impact on the immune system, has impact on inflammation like on gingivitis. And then it has this effect even on diversity. And I think this makes sense, right? Foods that have been aged have been, honored for generations is something that's of value. So I just think it's great that they're putting the science behind it to show hey, this is why this compound is so exceptional. So Kyolic aged garlic extract, to me, just one of the real just highlights of the natural product industry and what companies should be doing and making. And that's why, that's why I talk about aged garlic extract, because I really believe they're doing it right.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the immune system, we had somebody write to us, it was either yesterday or the day before, about a friend and wanted to know what could this person, I had told Gary to tell her Moducare in a message, but can
it's a great product, by the way.
It is. Product. It's a wonderful product. Can Kyolic aged garlic extract help support the immune system? I think you alluded to that in your comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it finds its most value will be, prevention of cold and flu. And then, look, anything that turns off inflammation or neuroinflammation, anything that turns off the flames of inflammation in your body is going to help your immune system, right? We got a lot of people that are, exposed now to mold is a big issue, and, Lyme and other kind of vectors are big issues. And, your immune system is pretty diverse. And the big question is, well, what part of my immune system is it helping? Because I think, we're finding out that, holy crap, I mean, there's a lot of things going on with the immune system when people get sick. So I think it's that aged garlic extract, a great baseline for people and their health. Why I love Moducare is because it's literally the plant fats and the plant sterol called glucosides that act as food. If you ate plant food, because I do agree that not everything needs to be plant-based, but you know what people don't do? I think it's funny. People just don't eat plants. We've got to go out and buy engineered foods that say plant-based, right? I think it's interesting. Let's just go out and eat some broccoli, but there's no broccoli shops. Plenty of cupcakes, plenty of liquor stores, plenty of bakeries, but no broccoli shops.
No,
it'd be great if we could start doing that.
That would be a dismal business adventure.
Yes, it would.
If you're looking to lose money as for a tax write-off, open up a broccoli shop. 877-8 a broccoli shop. Can you imagine? 877-897-8255. Soylent Green. Remember that movie?
Made of people.
They ran out of food, man. So they can't get any more organic than that. You put humans into what form do you remember that movie, Jim? Soylent?
Of course I do.
Okay.
Of course I do.
I'm trying to remember what it looked like.
That was the line at the end of the movie. Soylent Green is people.
Soylent Green is people. It's not only for the people, it is the people. Oh, that would be the quiz question. Who was the star in that movie? We'll be right back.
Want to get at the core issues that make weight
health question of the day, keying off of what I talked about in the first portion of the show and top of this show with James Lavelle. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, your CDC, and mine too, the prevalence of obesity, just obesity, among children and adolescents in the United States is 8% or around, let's see, let me do round numbers, 8% or 19%. What do you think? I'll give you two choices. What do you think the current prevalence of obesity is among children and adolescents in the U.S.? 8% or 19%? Here's the number to call. If you have the right answer, you'll win a $25 supplement gift card.
It's 877-897-8255. That's 877-897-TALK.
Jim, welcome back. How much Kyolic aged garlic extract should a person take a day?
Well, it depends on what your goal is. The minimum would be, I like having people get over 1,000 milligrams a day. If you're looking for kind of the big cardiovascular benefits, so, the blood vessels getting better, blood pressure, 2,400 milligrams a day. So if you're getting the Kyolic Reserve, that would be 2 capsules twice a day. And then in the gingivitis study, they actually were at 3.6 grams per day. So, you can take as much as you want, it looks like, depending on what studies you look at. But where you really need to start out is try to get in over 1,000, and that'll at least get you some of the benefits that really have been proven in human studies on heart health.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of grams, what do you think? A gram, 2 grams a day?
Well, it'd be 1 gram, and they don't come in 500 milligram capsules usually. There's a variety of them, but you can go 1 to 3 grams a day.
1 to 3 grams.
The more you're worried about your heart health, and if you already have a blood pressure that's starting to elevate, and if you're already overweight, I would suggest you get up over 2 grams a day for more protection.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to St. Petersburg, Florida. Joe lives in St. Petersburg. Joe, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Doc?
Good. By the way, we have a hat for you, brother.
I know. I was waiting for somebody to call me to let me know when I can come in.
You can come in anytime you want.
Okay.
When would you? When would you like to? Would you like to come into the studio?
Well, even at the studio on a Starbucks.
Now, would you like to come in studio and be in the studio while we broadcast the show?
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, I will get to you in a second. What's the answer to the question?
I would say 19%.
Yeah, it's 18.5. I rounded it up. About 18.5% of children and adolescents are obese.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's really bad. It's scary.
It's more than that. It's just downright dangerous, and it's wrong that.
Oh my God.
That I don't know. It's not right to have children grow up with adult diseases. Some of these kids got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, the beginnings of heart disease already. They haven't even reached 21 years of age.
Oh, man.
They're being denied something that should be part of childhood, which is good health. And it's not, the forecasting models have it going up and up. It doesn't show any indication of abating. It's a linear rise. It's almost like a rocket ship taking off in its linear projection. It's just
well, Doc, growing up, being Italian, when I was young, I was overweight because they kept feeding me the meatballs and the spaghetti.
Well, I was skinning. I was like a rail. I ate more. Eating pasta and meatballs and whatever that was coming out of my ears. My mother was an Italian immigrant. I didn't get fat. I was outside running around playing till 7 o'clock at night when the street lights came on. So was Jim Lavelle, I'm sure. But let me know when you want it. Gary sent you. Did you send him an email?
Yes, I did. And his hat's up front.
Yeah.
So you can come by anytime and get that.
When would you stay on the line? We'll talk. Don't hang up the phone. Gary's going to talk to you off air. Don't hang up the phone.
All right, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jim, welcome back. So the Kyolic aged garlic extract comes in different formulas, and each formula's, all of them have the one constant. They have aged garlic extract in it, right?
That's correct.
Right. So I don't know how many different SKUs they have with these different formulas. I use the Kyolic Aged Garlic Extract Reserve because it has boosted dosage level.
Yeah, that's the one I like. I mean, but you know, once again, if you're looking for immune support and you want to get the one with mushrooms in it, that's great.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I think people should think about is, what do I need for this time, what time of season? And what I always do is they can always combine their aged garlic extract. So you can get some reserve and then get, I want to use the cholesterol formula. I want to use the immune formula. I want to use the blood sugar formula. But the big thing is to get that amount in that you think is important. And for me, I always try to encourage people, get over 2 grams a day in. I think it's really the best dosage for the majority of people, especially when 78% of people are overweight, 38% of people are obese. We got a lot of people that are chronically inflamed in their body, and their blood vessels are getting thick, and they're plaquing up, and their blood sugars are going up, and they're creating a chronic inflammatory engine in their body.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you. At this A4M conference, has anybody given a paper on obesity being one of the greatest threats to successful aging?
Oh, everybody's talking about that. I mean, that's it's.
But has anybody given a paper on it? Have they literally talked about how it ages the body?
It's talked about continually.
Really?
That isn't the issue. The issue is until you get people to really understand why they're eating what they're eating. I can tell you right now, I mean, people have craving patterns. They fail every day because of their craving patterns.
Well, those craving patterns are conditioned patterns, James.
And genetic, right? The D2L1 genes.
The obesity epidemic is not accounted for by genetics, brother.
No, I disagree with you completely there.
I know you do.
There is an alcohol gene, and people do have a genetic predisposition to becoming alcoholics and reward eaters.
Well, we'll debate.
I disagree with you more on that.
We'll debate about it. So you're saying that the obesity...
I'd love to debate that with you because there's multiple papers on it. That'd be awesome. Let's do it.
You're saying that the obesity epidemic is accounted for by genetics.
No, I did not say that.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get you back on the show, and we'll go back and forth on this. I agree with you. Genetics is involved, but it doesn't account for the major portion of the variance. Thank you, James. We love you. We'll see you Monday.
Everyone's raving about the newest botanical superstar hitting the store shelves nationwide. Hemp-derived